Are you ready, kids?
Hello and welcome to another episode of SpongeComs. This is Employee Emilian, here today to bring you the Sponge commentary for Season 1, Episode 4, which consists of Naughty Nautical Neighbours and Boating School, both of which aired on August 7th, 1999. But before we get started and get through the intro and all, my question of the week this week for you is, did SpongeBob start off any less than great? Like, do you think it got much better over time? Do you think that it started off perfect in these first couple episodes? Let me know what you think in the comments, and it might be featured next week. But for now, let's get to this. Naughty Nautical Neighbours was the first episode to be written by Sherm Cohen and Aaron Springer, but Mr. Lawrence was pretty much a regular at this point. But you can tell that Aaron Springer stuck around for the show because the animation in this, although not directly his, is very noticeable, is very fluid and lively. Like, you can even see from just the faces already that there is something unique about the art style that they chose for this one. That's something that is pretty interesting about Season 1, that every episode has its own unique flavor. Like, you can tell if it's an Aaron Springer episode or an Ennio Teresen episode or a Mark O'Hare episode. I don't think Mark O'Hare was around at this point, but you know what I mean. It is very fun to look back with higher picture quality and see the distinctness of each episode. And here we see how the episode starts off with SpongeBob and Patrick communicating through bubbles, which is a very cute idea. I like it. I don't exactly know how this works, how you put sound into a bubble, but, you know, it beats iPhone X. I don't know. I'm not much of an iPhone connoisseur. I just wanted to make a modern joke. And here we get to where I start to tune out of the episode, honestly. Again, I'll keep this as unbiased as possible, so I'll just quickly say that I'm just not a big fan of misunderstanding stories, especially when they're literally, SpongeBob and Patrick are literally just a backyard apart. That's part of the reason why this is number 5 on my worst list. Just getting this out of the way so I don't have to get all negative, because this episode does get better after this. I just think that this is less than justified. Do they have poor eyesight or something? I don't know. But yeah, I think that this is actually a pretty Squidward-ish thing to do, to get them to not like each other so that, for his own amusement, I assume, because he prides himself on negativity a lot of the time, and I can kind of see that this sort of angle to him was something that wasn't exactly in the first few episodes, but this is where he starts to really enjoy being mean to SpongeBob. And that has some highs and lows over the years. They do sort of go too far in places, but given the nature of his character to be the punching bag, as it were, you can always tell that he's going to be taking down a peg, and gosh, he's taken down like 50 pigs in this episode alone. The rest of this episode is just about Squidward atoning for breaking SpongeBob and Patrick apart. And a lot of it's pretty entertaining, honestly. I think that this is an alright episode if you're into, like, Squidward in the midst of SpongeBob's antics, because this is that sort of episode. It is sort of the genesis of these sorts of episodes where it is more about wordplay, more about dialogue, and more about just how much you don't want to be in between these two. Like, I think even on a symbolic level, Squidward literally being in between SpongeBob and Patrick, their houses, at least, I think that kind of works. And, oof, we're up to the fork scene. That's actually kind of gruesome, even if it is kind of cartoony. Like, they bring out the old KO here. Patrick doesn't look right there. I gotta say though, this episode is filled with a lot of like clever visual gags, despite it being more dialogue heavy. Like this, I'm sure is someone's kink, but let's get through this. And oof, I think that this is a pretty painful moment. The fork being stuck in Squidward's lips. Like, oof, that doesn't seem like a lot of. So, Squidward and Patrick, this isn't as well developed as Squidward and SpongeBob, but it is fun to, like, think about because this is mostly just Patrick wanting a new friend after he ditched SpongeBob. So he just goes to the closest thing he can think of, and oh my god, I love SpongeBob's face there. And yeah, that kind of raises a little thought bubble in my head about how well season one Patrick is characterized. I will go a bit more into this as we get to episodes like Nature Pants, but oh, and this is Gary's cameo in the episode. He technically isn't there in the episode, but you know what I mean. So yeah, Patrick's characterization is a bit all over the place in season one. Like, you can still tell that he's dumb and that he can honestly tell that's E minor, even though it isn't E minor. That is just a little note I have. But yeah, he doesn't seem as... They didn't know what kind of dumb he was meant to be for a little while. That's the feeling that I get from these sorts of episodes. Like, is he supposed to be crazy dumb? Is he supposed to be airhead dumb? Is he supposed to be common sense dumb? He does become a mixture of all those things, but in season one, it's a lot more segmented. Like, when I see those early Patrick eyebrows, I know that I'm not getting the full Patrick that I know in season 2 and 3. But here we get to SpongeBob's part of the episode, or SpongeBob's part in the first half of the episode at least, where he takes off his pants, and yeah, that's a really revealing pair. Not really helped too much by just how into Squidward he seems. Like, you can tell that a lot about Aaron Springer's episodes, that I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but when his name is on an episode and SpongeBob and Squidward are in it, you can tell that SpongeBob has a teensy bit of a crush on Squidward. I know that the character is asexual and doesn't have any romantic feelings for at least living sentient characters. We'll get to that in a couple years. But yeah, SpongeBob does seem a bit too close to Squidward in some cases, and that can make for some pretty good jokes, like that one back there where he just... his grin widens as he says, friend. And also this really bad song that he sings to Squidward, which was a meme on YouTube about a decade ago, actually, where the title would just be, it took SpongeBob 10 years to master this, or it took SpongeBob 500 years to master this. I don't know why that took off, but yeah, I don't remember if they were remixes or anything, or if they were just the original scene posted over and over again, but it's a part of the SpongeBob internet mythos, if you can call it that. The SIM, the sim, I guess. And here's Patrick in Squidward's bath, just a little timestamp for if you're lagging behind or something. And we get more of SpongeBob and Patrick bickering, and I think this is the first time that they really get into SpongeBob and Patrick bickering, because they don't really do it a lot before this, but after this, you get it occasionally again in episodes like the Fry Cook Games and Rockabye Bivalve, and friends can bicker, but it generally isn't fun when it's all that they do, and in episodes where they bicker, they really bicker, and that can get a bit annoying. I know it's a fun kind of annoying for some, but yeah. Now for this last part of the episode where Squidward invites SpongeBob and Patrick over for, I guess, a meeting of some sort, an intervention, I'd say, and just gives them soda. I think that it's a very fun routine, and that it does get them back together in an unorthodox sort of way. You still get a bit more of that sort of vibe that you get earlier in the episode, where they just don't like each other for whatever reason. That reason being a very flimsy one, comedically flimsy, but I digress. But yeah, I really don't think that this is soda. Like, of course it is very bubbly and fat-inducing, but where have you ever seen soda come out of a seltzer bottle? Was it a thing in the 90s? Was it a thing way before then? Is it going to get a revival? I don't know. But yeah, this scene is really fun because of just how it's actually the funniest part where they bicker because it is more about a comedic routine than just them being angry at each other. And they have a lot of fun with it, like Patrick accidentally putting his glass out again. And it also has a bit of a payoff where SpongeBob and Patrick are really fat at the end, filled with bubbles. I don't think that soda does that to you as quickly, especially with just one bottle. I unfortunately know because I'm a bit of a soda addict. I'm trying to fix that. But this isn't about me, it's about SpongeBob and Patrick and how burps solve their problems. I don't really think it's about burps as much as it is bubbles. And yeah, it does go back to the start of the episode. It does go back to them liking each other by communicating through bubbles. So yeah, I think that's actually a pretty sweet way to end the episode. And of course, you see Squidward's house get a lot less detailed as it's exploding because that's just how cell animation works. You just have to prioritize effect over detail when it's something like that. And of course, this is the first time that Squidward's house gets absolutely demolished, which they do over and over and over again. I don't know how Squidward can still live between SpongeBob and Patrick if this keeps happening, but you know, this isn't meant to be one of those shows where things carry on between episodes. They do have a sort of reset button. And yeah, I think that this episode is alright. It's in my bottom 5 because, well, season 1's quality is just that high that an episode that's just alright is in the lower half. But if you like it, more power to you. Now we get to Boating School, written by Ennio Teresen Jr., Eric Weiss, and Mr. Lawrence, and for most of this, I'm going to be talking about why this episode was made and why the boating school subgenre of episodes was conceptualized. Essentially, when the show was being approved by Nickelodeon, they found it really funny, but they wanted a few things changed, namely for SpongeBob to actually be a kid and go to school. Steven Hillenburg didn't want this because he wanted SpongeBob's age to be very vague so that anybody of any age could relate to him. So they came to this compromise that he would occasionally attend boating school, or driving school as we landlubbers call it. And I think that this was a good compromise because it is a constant part of the show, SpongeBob wanting to get his driver's license, and if he does graduate, if he does get his license, then that part of the deal will end. So although it is kind of frustrating that exactly 20 years on, he still hasn't gotten his license, it was made for a purpose, and that purpose did come in the form of a pretty good introductory episode to this sort of style of episode. And right here, we've got a really great joke. You'll notice in the credits that they call this student a customer, actually. I don't know why they do that. And here we have the introduction of Mrs. Puff to the show. Mrs. Puff, obviously, being nothing like SpongeBob. She is kind of jaded. She is kind of nervous about all these boating exams. And yeah, she is pretty relatable for teachers, I can find. And here we have SpongeBob being very smart. One of the first times that he's actually been shown to be highly intelligent. And it's with the oral exam. And you'll know from my My Little Pony video a couple days ago that I don't drive yet, but I have taken practicals, and it is nowhere near as easy as SpongeBob makes it out to be. You have to know a lot about the road and all these different rules, and apparently 1924 is very important for boating school. Was it the year a certain car was manufactured? Is 1924 or 7:24 p.m. curfew? That's my theory, the latter curfew thing. And this scene is also really good, despite a minor editing problem over here, where the sound or the music abruptly cut off. But I do really like this, showing exactly what the problem with SpongeBob and boating school is. The actual doing of the test, where he just really... It's not that he's destructive, that comes later on, but in season 1, at least, it's because he's very nervous behind the wheel, and he gets all flustered and shy, and that's really sweet. I really like how they gave SpongeBob a genuine second or third dimensional flaw, and right here we have the first my leg gag, and the first time Mrs. Puff puffs up. I don't really think that they deepen her voice anymore. I think the last time they did that was in Sandy's Rocket, I think. So yeah, I do really like that scene. It is very iconic in a way, especially because of the my leg gag now. And here we see Gary with shoes for the first time, or feet maybe. They made an episode about that recently, about a month ago, but I haven't seen it yet, so I can't really judge it. And here we also have SpongeBob meeting Patrick in his own house, and this is the first of many times their characters kind of break and enter into each other's houses. It's not good manners by any stretch, but it is a fun recurring motif in the series, just to make interactions a little more sudden and a little faster. But yeah, SpongeBob just sort of getting his anxiety about the exam off on Patrick, and Patrick actually being smart with it. It honestly does make this a really interesting episode to watch in hindsight. This is probably like 37 or 38 or 39 times. I'm not watching the audio at the moment, but it does sort of seem like Patrick already kind of knows his way around driving, but this was in SpongeBob's amount of failures was in the high 30s, while in Driven to Tears, which is the first time apparently that Patrick has taken the boating exam, it was somewhere in the 50s, I think. I don't know, that's a weird conundrum. Maybe there's like two separate timelines, or maybe SpongeBob doesn't have a timeline to start with and every episode is self-contained, and there was a bubble transition sound but no bubbles. In general, this episode has absolutely no bubble transitions. It's one of those season 1 episodes where they just used wipes or fades. And that was a really good joke. Patrick yelling, testing into the mic. And yeah, honestly, the more I watch this episode, the more you can kind of see the nuts and bolts of it artistically. You can kind of see exactly what very subtle errors are in it, like repeating animation or just having stuff cut out a bit early. That makes it pretty interesting to watch. Not completely unwatchable. It doesn't take me out of like what's happening in the story, but it is kind of fun to look at. And of course, you have Mrs. Puff getting out of the hospital. Apparently, for some reason, they started to make jokes about Mrs. Puff going to jail often, starting in Hall Monitor. And I really don't know why that is. And also here we have Patrick being the smart one in this situation. And as I said earlier, Patrick's characterization changes a lot across season 1. And here, it does seem, this is probably a role that Sandy would have nowadays, because Patrick being smarter than SpongeBob is kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to be offensive. The most offensive things just came to my mind anyway, I digress. But it is something that does not seem totally alright for an episode. But it is about SpongeBob being anxious. It is about Patrick being a supportive friend, so that I can enjoy. So, here we get to the driving exam, and this is where the true nature of Mrs. Puff's boating school is revealed, because you don't just have a brick wall in the middle of it, even if it is for a simple driving test or a turning part of the obstacle course, because this is an obstacle course. It's not like the sushi maker, but you do see a flaming ring of death later on, and that's a sailor signal, I guess. It looks like a sailor flag. Steven Hillenberg really liked putting those in, and here's what I was talking about with this episode not feeling completely all there, because you have a montage, but it just plays the music, and it's a really good track. It's Hello Blues, I think. But it does feel a bit empty without like sound effects or Patrick laughing here, because I'm just so used to later montages adding in more sound effects and all that, and Mrs. Puff's face there is the stuff of my nightmares. So it is a decent montage. It does sort of show exactly what's going on. And then they reused a bit of animation, just flipped it upside down. And then we get to the ending of this episode, which is where the episode kind of crashes and burns, but not in a terrible way. it is sort of the most destructive part of the episode, and it is sort of disappointing in hindsight that this is technically the closest SpongeBob has ever gotten to getting a license, even though he's not the one getting the information. But honestly, what do you think would happen if he got his license here and now? Would he still need to have the walkie-talkie in his brain? Because apparently SpongeBob getting mind controlled was a common theme in season 1, if you take this and Plankton into consideration. But yeah, I think that Patrick's sort of bailing out on this, it is sort of probably the least justified part of this, because I don't know, he just doesn't seem like a good friend at that point. I think he got a little too comfortable in SpongeBob's house for my liking, to be honest, but yeah, I'm just bailing on this instead of letting SpongeBob... I don't know what my problem with this ending is. It's just sort of destructive. I don't even have a problem with the ending on a surface level, really. I'll just let you see the animation constantly repeat. Patrick's house not looking all there. They use the exact same color paint as the background. And here we see some of the animation being reused towards this very end of the sequence. And this kind of does take me out of the experience, unfortunately. However, we do end it off with the second time Mrs. Puff puffs up, and the second my leg gag of the show. And the lighthouse got repaired pretty quickly if this was just overnight. He thinks he cheated. So Mrs. Puff goes to the hospital again. I wonder why this wasn't the recurring gag. I don't know why they switched it to going to jail and Mrs. Puff having a consistent criminal record. Maybe it was just less funny to the writers. Maybe it was just not as entertaining of an idea, a character constantly having to go to the hospital. But they do go to the hospital quite a few times in like the mid to late 2000s era. There are a lot of episodes set in the hospitals. And I think this is a very sweet, earnest ending to the episode. Gary getting SpongeBob's unicycle for him. That is very cute. And Gary going up on him. That's very nice. So yeah, boating school, it does have a bit of a rocky ending, but I like the episode all the same. It's a really good start to boating school episodes in a lot of ways. So that's how I feel about Nautical Neighbours and boating school. Question of the week, as I said again, did SpongeBob start off any less than great? Do you think that the show got consistently better, or was it perfect from the start? Because episodes like these two, Nautical Neighbours and boating school, do remind me of that very, very early period in season 1 where it was still finding its footing. And of course, next week you've got Pizza Delivery, one of the show's absolute best episodes, and Home Sweet Pineapple, which is another really great episode. So yeah, that is sort of food for thought. Goodbye for now.